Yes, live. So we're live. Thank you for one more web seminar by our own Alexandre Guay, and he's going to talk about the emergence of consciousness.
Okay, thank you very much. And it will be a very whip. My slides have too much material because it's part of the paper I'm writing. So it's just to remind me, I'm not expecting for you to read the slides. It's just for me. And of course, I don't know how much you know about philosophy of mind, philosophy of neurosciences. So of course you can ask questions at any moment. So we don't care. Okay, we don't need to wait until the end to ask questions. Even the non-philosopher, you can ask it. Okay, maybe you will probably ask a question that they want to ask, but they are ashamed. So don't worry. Okay, so is everybody knowing the hard problem of consciousness? Of course. Chalmers, you all know that?
No.
Okay. You have a role.
Okay, all right.
So, the hard problem of consciousness. There's many formulations. It's a famous argument, 1995, by Chalmers, but it's an old argument, is that how could you explain that the formulation I put it in explaining could be formulated differently. How could you explain the first person conscious phenomenal experience, like I see blue now, based on an ontology, for example, coming from neurology or physics, that is just relational properties. So how these relational properties that are the third person properties, the properties discovered by science, could connect, could explain, could make sense, depends how you formulate the thing, of the first person. Okay, and that's the problem. And it's called the hard problem because you don't want just a correlation between the physical and the mental. You want to have a story to say how one reduced to the other or not, and why, and how it works. So that's the hard problem. And it's called the hard problem for historical reasons. It's not necessarily the hardest problem. Okay, so when I decided to stop doing philosophy of physics for a time, and I said, what is the next best problem? Of course, the hard problem is the best problem for me, at least, for my taste of problems. And I say, okay, since I'm doing metaphysics, so I will attack the problem from an ontological point of view, which is not the only one. We can attack this problem in many ways. And I say, is a discussion about the ontology, the relation between the mind and the body, or the brain, or something else, helping us to understand research, insist on new problem, etc., etc. And it's easy to see that's the plan that I will follow as much as I can. And it's easy to see how some position about the ontology, the ontological relation of the mind and the body, orient your research. It's not just, I don't know which one is true. At the end of this conference, you will not know which one is the right one. I don't have this, that I finally solved a hard problem. But at least the kind of ontology you adopt change the way you work on the problem. For example, so don't read that, it's too long. If you are a dualist, what is a dualist? A dualist about properties. So you believe that there's physical properties and there's mental properties, and they are categorically distinct. They are completely different. They have a different relation to space and time, etc. So that's the dualism of properties, which is very popular among people in philosophy of mind. One of the difficulty to do research after that, to do science, if you believe it's your framework, is that unfortunately you will be able to study the mind through psychological methods. You will be able to study the brain by biological, neurological method. You will maybe even be able to show some correlation, but you will never be able to say something more. Why? Because you cannot do causation relation, because if you act on the body, You can have good reason to see that you can hack on the mind, but you don't have tools to hack on the mind without acting at the same time on the body. If I talk to someone, if I try to change your mental state, that I've put you in front of an image, I am working on the brain. I cannot say I work separately on the mind than on the brain to be able to exemplify a causal relation, for example. If it's a constitution relation, I cannot also be able to show it. At best, I could show a supervenience, and supervenience the weakest position. So it doesn't mean it's false. It means that it's a kind of a ontological answer that will make the research extremely complicated. So maybe they are right. It's defended by Chalmers, for example. But I think they are quite optimistic about the way we could scientifically, for example, through empirical means, study the relation between the mind and the brain. On the other extreme, we have the monist reductionist. I see that now Kevin is looking for literature against my argument, but I'm sure they are bad. They don't know. I'm wrong. I'm right. Okay. If you say, okay, there's no such thing as different ontology between the mind and the brain. The mind is just what the brain does. Okay? That has been a very successful and interesting position because it guided most of the actual research in neuroscience and neuropsychology. But after 30 years where we are unable even to look at the brain and know if the person is awake, we still cannot know, measuring a brain, if the person is awake. Some philosopher like François Camera, who was a postdoc here, became less and less optimistic about will we be able to solve the hard problem. And here, I want to quote François because I think he's representing a certain tendency in the community. However, there has been recently growing concern that it is impossible to maintain that physicalism, so monism, is true of phenomenal consciousness, and at the same time, the account for our distinct epistemic situation regarding phenomenal consciousness, in virtue of which phenomenal consciousness seems persistently distinct from the physical. So, ontologically, epistemologically, even if it was the reductionist program was interesting and went far, they seem to have hit a profound wall. They do not believe they will solve the hard problem. Okay. So after that, they have to define some kind of eliminationist. In fact, it's an illusion that we're conscious. Or epiphenomenalist, it's a side effect, but it does not do anything. Yes.
What is the relationship between monism and physicalism? Can you have a monism that is not physicalist?
Yes. But today, all the monists are physicalists, most. And what they mean by physicalist depend. What they mean is the brain.
Okay.
Most of them. Yeah. But of course you could defend all kind of reductionism. Yes.
But what about the weird guys who authority went earlier about we think consciousness is everywhere and
yeah, but that's exactly when you cannot explain. That's why panpsychism is popular. Because if you cannot explain the relation between the mind and the other properties, you say that there's mind everywhere.
Yeah, but then it's a monism, it's not a physical.
It's a monism that is not physicalist. But I asked myself, should I put panpsychism somewhere in the talk? And I decided not to, because it's an interesting position. So for those who doesn't know, it's a graduation. So we are very conscious. Electrons are less conscious, but they are conscious in a certain sense. They can exhibit consciousness. And table too, but much less than us. And it's clearly a position completely ad hoc to solve the hard problem. It's interesting. It could connect to other kind of position. I'm not against per se, but for now it's more, okay, how can we get around the hard problem? Everything is conscious. But maybe in the future, Yeah, I'm open to changing metaphysics, Metaphysics is at the service. I don't really believe we describe the world as it is anyway, So for now, psychism seems one empirically very difficult to study. I'm not sure it will help neurologists to guide their research. If you say, oh yeah, everything is potentially conscious. Yeah, maybe. So why? What is the project here of this paper is to say, okay, let's explore other possibilities. Like emergence of the mind. So emergence, ontological metaphysical emergence is always understood as a compromise between dualism and monism. So why not explore this possibility to see how it can shed some light on the relation between the mind and the body? Okay. Okay, first problem. What is emergence? First problem. Second problem, are there ontological emergence phenomena? And here, problem begins. In order to say what is emergence, you need to know something that you believe emergent and it fits. Because it's not a concept where you say, oh, it's in natural language, we know what is emergence. It's just, I just have to analyze the concept on my chair and think about, yeah, emergence must be, blah, 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 blah. Emergence is one of these concepts that is philosophically interesting, but is not clear what is the meaning. So usually in order to be able to say what is emergent, I need to know at least, okay, what kind of phenomena I want to modelize as emergent. But how can I identify this class of phenomena if I don't know what is emergence? So it's circular. So the standard way in Anglo-Saxon, Anglophone philosophy, it's not the same in any kind of philosophy, by the way, but in Anglophone philosophy, is to copy science. So I'll start with a class of phenomena that are supposed to be emergent, are considered to be emergent, and build a theory of emergence, and after that go back to the class of phenomena. So if you look in the literature, especially the scientific literature, what scientists call emergent, you have all these cases. Scientists will call all kind of phase transition, classical, quantum, topological, social, the passage from a crowd to a mob is often called emergent. You have all kind of functional properties of artifacts, organs, mostly all functional properties are sometimes called emergent. You have a lot of cases where there are interaction between ontological level. People believe that there's level of reality, the physical one, the biological one, the psychological one, the social one. And if these levels interact, that's emergence. Or collective behavior, like bird flocks, fluids, dynamic, emergent. And of course, scientists often say, okay, consciousness and free will are good case of emergence. The difficulty if you to build a theory of emergence based on this vast class is that it's a very non-homogeneous class. Some cases of emergence in the list are compatible with some kind of theoretical reduction, other not. Some require the postulation of ontological level, other not. Some involve a relation between the base and the emergent that is synchronic, other diachronic, other not related to time at all. Some are compatible with causality, other not. So it's a too diverse class. At the end, my guess is that the best you can do with a class that is that diverse is emergence equal dependent novelty, which is a completely useless definition because it's too general. Okay. So in order to say something about the mind, I will spend most of this talk to discuss about theories of emergence. Okay, and it will be depressing. If you sleep, tell me, I will skip the slides because most of it is dead. Okay? I'm sorry. Okay, so what I will do, I will go to select a coherent, a smaller case of coherent case. I will show how such a theory of emergence works on this coherent case. And I will do that for two theories of emergence. And after that, I will see if they can take into account the other case than the one they were built on. Okay? So that's a methodology. And hopefully, after certain work by iterating the procedure, we will get somewhere. And I can already say we won't. We won't get to a unification, but we will get something interesting. Okay, so the two theory of emergence I will treat here is Jessica Wilson, metaphysical emergence, who is giving a talk right now, yesterday in Namur, or the day before, and mine, because they are obviously the two best. No. Because they are representative, they are extreme. Jessica Wilson is now one of the dominant position on certain kind of emergence now, and it's the complete reversed opposite of my theory. In fact, Jessica Wilson wrote explicitly that this is not a theory of emergence. It's not even wrong. It's not a case. Okay, I'm not saying that her theory is not a theory of emergence, but that could be discussed. Okay, let's see the kind of cases that inspired Jessica Wilson to build her theory of metaphysical emergence or ontological emergence is not explicit in the book, but it's pretty clear through some passages that we know what was her motivation. Her motivation, if emergence exists, she's not sure that it exists, but she said if it exists, it's because of that. Natural reality exhibit a kind of level or layer structure reflected in the broadly hierarchical structure of the spatial sciences. If ontological emergence exists, this structure is in a way compatible with the appearance of co-temporal material dependence coupled with autonomy. So the cases that interest Jessica Wilson, why she developed a theory of emergence, is that reality seems to be layered, like the biological and the psychological, for example. And these layer are materially dependent, but they have a certain autonomy. Okay? So her theory of emergence is a way to formalize this. In her book, she's proposing two definitions of kind of emergence, a weak one and a strong one. And Jessica Wilson is also a metaphysician that is an adept of the power ontology, so everything is in terms of powers. Okay? So weak emergent. What is it for a token feature S to be weakly metaphysically emergent from a token feature P on a given occasion is for it to be the case on that occasion. One, that S co-temporally materially depends on P, and two, S as a non-empty proper subset of the token powers had by P. So I have something here. They co-temporally depend materially, and here the power of here is a subset of the power here. So for Jessica Wilson, at least to be weakly emergent, to be emergent is to have less power, which is super bizarre because most people believe that emergence is more power. Okay, that's the weak form. The emergent has less power than its base. Yeah.
Can you explain what you mean by power? No, so
Thing disposition, stuff that do stuff. It's why I don't defend the power ontology. I have no idea. I think the causal power, stuff doing causally stuff in the world. I think it's what she needs. It's a primitive. It's not a critique, it's that it's her primitive and she tried to build everything else based on that. But I think if you push her, she would say at one point, you cannot define powers.
It's like the capacity to do something?
To do stuff.
Okay.
But it's not a disposition, because it could be dispositional, but it's not a disposition kind of the real disposition is that say it's a thing that does something under a certain trigger.
Mhm.
She does not, she said, no, it's more general than that. It's capacity to do stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
So there's less capacity to do stuff here than here.
I expect the answer, but what does she mean exactly by materially? Could it be only physical?
Okay, this is something also I wanted to understand, and I read the book in details, and at no point she explained what is this. I think she says my best guess is that since she thinks here special sciences, so what she is interested in is like biology, sociology. I think material is physics. That's my best guess, but it's not explicit. And she's not a philosopher of science, she's a metaphysician.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of interpretation to apply his theory. Okay, and of course she has the strong one, and the strong one is the intuitive one. The emergent has more power in its base. So that's the two version. Goes okay, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Sure?
That's okay.
It's okay? These are definitions that are, very philosopher, blah, 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 blah. When people are not used, it's quite dense. Yes?
So, just clarification, if with power we mean capacity, and you said
To do stuff.
to do stuff, and
Yeah.
the part is less capable to do stuff.
Yeah.
It's not the other way around concerning emergence. It's
Yeah, exactly. No, but exactly. No, exactly. The emergence you have in mind is what she calls strong emergence.
Okay.
Okay?
Can you put an example of weak emergence?
Yeah.
Or rather?
Yes, I will give you a functional realization is a case of weak emergence. I have a slide to show you in details, okay?
I don't want to start discussion, but it's in a way the fact that something emerged from nothing is still constrained by the if it's physics, at the bottom it's constrained the kind of power that can be added at the emergent level. So in this way it has less power because it's more constrained in terms of the possibility space.
Yeah,
I think that's what she means. No?
yeah, for weak emergence, yes. But for here, that's the point. That's what most people that believe that the emergence and the base is co-temporal, okay? It's what they have in mind. There's strong reason to believe that we never spot an example of this at all. Okay, and Jessica Wilson is quite a good metaphysician because she says, yeah, even in her book, she says, I didn't find any example of strong emergence, a convincing example, except things like free will or the mind, which is already problematic. So already there's good reason to be skeptical about strong emergence. So it's difficult to reconcile with metaphysical principle of closure of physics. It's also difficult to understand how we could understand conservation of local energy. We should, if there were such a thing as strong emergence, we should see signs in physics, some missing physics somewhere, and we don't. So it's not impossible, of course, but it's just not easy to have an example. But an example of weak emergence, realization of a function. You have P acts as a material object with all its properties, and P as an axe. So the kind of property that participate to the axe are just the one that produce the function. And all the acts of the same type, they will share this core of functional property, but they could be one in wood, one in metal, blah, blah, blah. So of course, if you go in a mirror with my colleague working on emergence, all of them would say, this is obviously not emergence. But it's the same prejudice that she has against us. So I should not, we don't know what is emergence. There's no such thing as the concept of emergence that we already know. So I'm ready to see how far can she goes with this definition. And that's interesting because that applies easily to realization of function in artifacts, but also what is the the heart has effectively emerged the property of to be a pump. Of course, there's all the physical property of the heart, but it goes down, it does that, it does that. But as an object, it has a new functional properties that is a subset of all the properties below. So all heart of the same type will share the same functional property, even if physically they all are unique. So you see how she sees this strange conception of emergence, but quite interesting.
Sorry, but how is that a subset of the function? Because it's like it's a new function, no? The heart,
Yeah.
or that, or the gas. Because
I have the same intuition than you, but I try to be charitable with the person that says that I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay? Okay? So you have the objects. Of course, the axe as a material object cut. Okay? But it has the capacity to burn because it's in wood. Okay? The capacity to burn is not part of the object as a tool, but it's part of the object as a material object. But the capacity to cut is in the object as a material and as a tool. Therefore, it's a subset.
But no, I mean the wood itself does not have the capacity to cut.
No, but this part, yes.
Yeah, but only if attached to the
Yes.
wood stuff.
Yes. The capacity of all the objects, yes.
Oh, okay.
I try to make sense of everything. Okay.
No, fine.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to pile too much this reason, but the axe is not like an object. Because if you call it an axe, it's a tool that is designed as an axe.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not an material object. So the axe can be an material object.
Yes.
Irrespective of the social
Yes.
function of
Okay.
the axe.
So
It's the same for the axe.
she would say
What you call an
she
axe.
would say that realization of function, if you look at them without their history, this is what you see. It's emergent. The emergence is not a historical process for her. It has a history, but it's the emergence relation is not related to historical process. Okay, contrary to me, for example. For her, I can see that the function of the axe is emergent, like the function of the art. Only if at the moment I look at the objects. It's not something extended in time. Of course, if I want to know how does we have art, you have to go in time. But the emergence of the function is synchronic. Even if to explain its origin, you have to go in time. I should show you this graph before. Okay. So when you see something, when you have any case of emergence, there's always a new descriptive level that appears. Yeah, always a descriptive level. It's just the way we talk. Okay. For her, this descriptive level is the emergence. For me, it has nothing to do. It's just a descriptive level. It's a sign that something happens. For me, the emergence is here. For her, it's here. Okay. Okay. By the way, this is not the dominant 98% of paper writing on emergence, it's that. Okay? 2% of emergence, 3% in the world, if that emergence is there. It's Humphreys, Gay, Sartana. And the first emergence, the people that include emergence in the 20s, they were also in that direction.
Sorry, but our stuff doesn't make much sense. This is a semantic extension. It has nothing to do with metaphysics.
Huh?
It's semantics. It's a question of semantics, not a question of metaphysics.
No, for them, it's metaphysical.
I deny that it's metaphysics.
Okay, of course. Okay, we can discuss. But I have to say that the intuition that guides most of the literature on metaphysical emergence is really something like the whole is bigger than the part. It's always not a relation to time. And I have to say, this is an example among the best, because at least she's not defending strong emergence, the weirdest part, that there would be new causal power, completely new, appear there from, I don't know where.
But at least it could be called metaphysical emergence.
Okay.
Sorry.
Maybe, but maybe there's no case of emergence. The goal is just to explore the spectrum of possibilities. Okay, let's go back. So that's Jessica Wilson. It works well for all kind of stuff, especially the weak emergence. It works well. At least there's examples. After that, we can say it's not really metaphysical, not emergent, but okay. And there's the Guay-Sartoner approach, which the case that we had in mind to modelize is phase transition, especially phase transition that do not seem to imply level or whole part relations. And now I will go fast because it's philosophy of physics and it's boring, okay? Okay? So the case that I think are quite convincing is the case of the fractional quantum Hall effects. Okay. I'm just thinking how far I should go in the explanation. Let's go fast to go to the mind as fast as possible, okay? The idea why this is, when it appeared, this effect that was discovered by scientists and they won the Nobel Prize pretty rapidly, is that when they produced this graph, people literally fell from their chair, okay? Because these, not the peak, but these things here, where there's a, what's the word, a reverse of a peak?
Valley?
A valley should not exist in nature. Okay? In this material, very low temperature, very high magnetic field. Okay? What you see here is signs 4, 4, 5, 7, 5 are signs of that the material is exhibiting as bizarre what we call statistics. Okay? Why is it surprising? Because we have a theorem. It's a theorem based on really basic axioms about the spin statistics theorems. Based on really basic axioms that if we renounce, we will really believe, okay, physics has to be changed completely. That in 3 spatial dimensions, there could be only 2 kinds of statistics for a particle, 2 kinds of general behavior. Fermions or bosons. And this theorem is very convincing. It's very, if you say, oh, the cost to renounce to this theorem is high. I would have to renounce to a lot of things like special relativity, basic things, and basic topological things in quantum mechanics. However, therefore, how do you interpret something that is neither fermions or bosons? So the first reflex was to say, okay, it's just some kind of weird collective behaviors of electrons, because what we measure is electron in the conductive electron. And electrons are fermions, but maybe they do some kind of weird stuff. And after that, it was a very bizarre result, is that if you understand the phenomena as purely a collective phenomena, you see that many fermions together, doing their bizarre stuff, collective stuff, produce a particles that has less charge than any of them. So each has a certain charge, they all have the same negative charge, you add them and you get less. So the collective behavior was reconsidered, and after that there's other result saying that if we had a quantum field theory, it's not important, but quantum mechanics, and we say, okay, let's have fermions, but force them to live in a world with 2 spatial dimensions, for X reason, this result is exactly what you would expect. So in this material, the dynamics, I'm not saying the material becomes suddenly flat, but the dynamics become strictly 2D. The particles lose their status of particles in 3D, and the solution are dynamics in 2D, which avoid the spin statistic, because the spin statistic theorem in 2D say there could be an infinite number of statistics. So we call these excitation, these quasi-particle anyons, because it's any statistics, anyons. Physicists have a lot of imagination. And there's interpretive challenge. Okay, so based on this, of that kind of examples, and there's many of them, this is the definition of ontological emergence of Sartoner and Guay. There's a dependent clause, a novelty clause, exactly two clauses like Wilson. So the state S2 is the product of a specially continuous process originating from, or quasi-continuous process originating from the state S1, for example, a causal process. In particular, the real, and I will discuss that the real later, to which S1 and S2 both belong, is closed, such that nothing outside the real participate in S1 to bring about S2. So that's the dependency clause. That's what she says materially depend. This is how we define dependence. And the novelty clause is S2 exhibit new entities, properties, or power that do not exist in S1 and that are moreover forbidden to exist in S1 according to the natural law, natural necessity we have to govern S1. Accordingly, different laws govern S2. So that's a very general definition, and you can operationalize it in this graph. In order to have the continuity, you have to have a general theory that will represent S1 and S2 through two models of the general theory. And so therefore this transformation should be compatible with causality, still Woodward or Pearl causality, to a very low ontologically causality, but M1 cannot be deformed in M2. Therefore, the laws governing M1 are different than the one governing M2. Okay. So we have these two versions of emergence, one that is there and one that is here. Okay? Now when we get to the third part of my methodology, check if one can explain the other examples and how it works. Can transformational emergence explain how you come from no axe to axe? So you have material to build the axe, because at the beginning you don't have the function, it's material. Bring the axe. The axe exhibits, among other properties, a new one. It's a function. It is a genuine normative possibility. The function was not impossible in the SL state, but not particularly effective. You could use the wood to try to cut stuff, but it's not that easy. Moreover, the law governing the initial state, there's no production of axe spontaneously by the law of the material. However, here, the imposition of the form, the function comes from the artisan. The artisan, or the machine that built the axe. So, it's not obvious that it will respect this part of our definition. Because in particular, the realm to which S1 and S2 both belong is closed. What the dependence clause tolerates is that contextual elements jointly participate with S1 to bring S2. What this clause denies true is that these elements act as radically extrinsic inference to the show. So in what way the work of the artisan is still inside the domain that we were exploring, or is it outside? So my guess is that it's not working very well for axes. Maybe it works well more for if it's natural selection for the function, but for our axis, it depends on the status of humans and things like that. It's not bad. It's not completely built. It works, but it works. I have to have a position about the status of artifact compared to function in the biological world. Okay. I will not discuss how I really spent a long time in the paper to try to apply weak emergence and strong emergence to the case, and it does not work at all. And I really try. Okay, I really try to say, okay, can we see that as a power thing? No. There's no way that the fractional coordinal effects could be the case of weak emergence at Wilson or strong emergence at Wilson. I really try. Okay. So I will skip all that because it's very technical argument and it doesn't work. So, conclusion of my methodological exploration. Weak emergence partly effective in the case it was built to develop. Not as effective to do something else. Guay-Sartoner is doing a little bit better, but not that much. So what should we conclude? Should we conclude to pluralism? Should we say both theories capture part of the emergent world? And if I was arguing that, the paper would be accepted so fast. Because to be pluralist today is the doxa. Okay? The way to get around every problem is to say, there's many solutions. There's many things. But I worry about that for the case of emergence. Why? Because there's a classical problem in metaphysics that is absolutely similar to that case. How could you say that the emergence à la Wilson and the emergence à la Guay are two kinds of the same thing? To say that, I have to have a theory of emergence that is a higher level that will be able to say that, okay, these two cases are two versions of the same thing. How can I know what is this theory? Since the only way I found to develop an emergence theory is to start from cases and go up. So the problem is that if I had such a theory that would say, okay, Guay-Sartoner is a kind of emergence, Wilson, Weikemer is a kind of emergence, this one is not a kind of emergence, I would have to argue for this theory based on what? On some cases. And the only way to get cases is to build a local theory of emergence. So I worry about the pluralist. I can bullshit in the paper, it's pluralism, of course. But I worry about, I cannot not even argue for it strongly. Because I would have to say something about what would be the class, the genus to classify these different species. And I don't know how to do that. If I knew how to do that, I would not have to develop this inductive methodology. Of course, if someone has very strong intuition about what is emergence and it cannot be something else, like clear, Jessica Wilson seems that by definition emergence is incompatible with causality, but I don't have that kind of intuition at all. Okay. So what should we do for here? So I say, okay, since I cannot find the right theory of emergence, I will use both on the kind of mind body to see if one is more interesting than the others. So now, the real subject. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. It's exactly the same as in Bordeaux. It's just that paper is too long. Okay. What is interesting is that I don't have to guess the position of Wilson. She's explicit about the mind-body problem in the book. Great, because it's consciousness and the last chapter is free will. So, good. What does she say? Is the mind weakly emergence? She's arguing against the mind is strongly emergence, and she said it's based on the zombie, blah, 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 and it makes no sense. I think she's right. Is the mind weakly emergent? Okay, and she says, yes, maybe. Qualitative conscious features are reasonably taken to be typically determinable rather than maximally determinate, such that these determinable conscious states are plausibly seen as actually realized by determining lower level physical states. And now you're trying to connect with the power ontology and say, well, why is she changing completely the vocabulary in the middle of the chapter? So what does it mean? Do you know the distinction in metaphysics, determinable, determinate? Of course.
No.
No, okay. So it comes from old discussion about universals and all that. If I have a determinable property, it's a more general property, and a determinate is a instantiation of this concept. So I have a color red,
Okay.
determinate. Red, crimson red. Okay, so it's pretty irrelative. Okay. But what she says, it's pretty clever. She says, the mind is a more the mental state exhibit a more general property than the physical one. But the one depends on the other. This physical one is just a more determinate property than the exhibit by the mental state. Ta-da! If we put that in the power ontology to get to the definition we had of weak emergence, feature P is a determinate of feature Q if and only if Q is associated with a proper subset of the power associated with P, and the set of power had by P but not by Q is not associated with any properties. So, mental state have a subset of the power of physical state, but they depend on it. But physical state are just the way that they do not exhibit other mental power, they only exhibit one. So that's the second point. Doo-doo. And that's the mind-body problem solved for you metaphysically. Okay. Guy Sartana never wrote about the mind. So to have someone, I asked a Gemini to apply my own theory, just to see. And it was pretty good, and I just copy-pasted on the board. So, a system undergoes a transformation. Okay, that's transformational emergence. This transformation changes the modal profile. Like I said, you pass from a certain thing that it was forbidden to a certain thing that is allowed. And this state cannot be produced in an ordinary manner without changing the laws. So the base state would be, a cognitive system that do not exhibit consciousness. There's a transformation of the system. After that, we have to say what is the difference. Is it a neuronal, synaptic, connective, biochemical? We have to say something more precise to understand the thing. And at some stage of the development of the system reorganized and is able now of consciousness. And that could be seen by new integrated neural architecture, global dynamics. We will see that later. What matters is not that the system becomes necessarily more complex, it's just it has access to other possibilities, can do different things. It's similar for when a being has an adaptation but change completely of ecological niche, it's a similar analogous transformation. Okay, so before in the base, the system could not instantiate conscious mental state. After transformation, it can. So there's new power, new ontological powers that appear, but they are not fundamental. It's not new physical laws. It's the same. It's just at that level of description. It's a power coming from the organization. Okay, so that's both. Now I apply both theory. But it's too vague to be interesting. It's just too general. If it does not connect to maybe interesting as metaphor, but you have to connect to the science if you want to say something that is interesting. But you see how it's very different. Here, higher level, new property, subset of properties, no discontinuity, it's at the same time. Here it's a transformation, and there must be some model change. No model change necessary for us. Okay. How can, yes?
Sorry, I'm still on the same question. So, in Wilson's case, the conscious mental states are a subset
Of the power of the physical one.
I don't understand that.
But I think there's nothing more to understand than what she says. This is what she believes.
So that means that
You can disagree. You can say, how could it be? Okay, but I think it's what she says. A little bit like, think about, acts as a tool, acts as a material object. So it's brain state that have consciousness, brain state that are not conscious.
but there's nothing physical in the brain that has consciousness, and that's the subset that then is picked up at the conscious level.
Of course, okay.
Maybe I'm.
No, so your feeling is that it does not solve the heart problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's nothing conscious in the neurons. But she said, no, it's not the way to think. It's like when you look at the material of the axe, there's no function exactly. The function is when you understand it's a tool. Like Given says, it's because of the intention of the person that built the object that specific way. So you have to think in a similar manner, but now there's no creator. Okay?
I think it's confusion. The thing is, there are a lot of, there is a larger space of possibilities if you look at physics, and this larger space of possibilities, the set of possibilities which correspond to mental states, is smaller.
Smaller, yeah.
So that it's more constrained, there is less power. I think that's what she said.
Yeah, so maybe the good way to describe the brain is not at the micro level, it's coarse grain or something like that.
Okay.
But still, you still would say, yeah, but how do we pass from third person to first person? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, but the point is that at that point, it's still too general. And mind definition also, what is this conscious capacity that appear? How does it work? So you have to operationalize the thing. And that's the part philosophy of mind of the dog. So one, you have to specify exactly what base you're talking about. Okay? Then you have to choose what kind of emergent feature. The conscious, it's maybe too large. Find some conscious property specific that you can say something interesting about. And you have to have something to say about the relation, okay? Because maybe she's right. Okay, maybe the world is like she said, but if you have nothing to say about the relation, the scientist that want to use your worldview to explore does not know what to measure, what to inference, what to probe. And now the operation is because now it's becoming complicated. Because if you look at the literature about cognition and mind, not everybody agree where is the base, where is the cognition happening. Okay? If you believe it's inside the head, there's at least 3 main research programs. Some would say the cognition appear because the brain is analogous to a certain kind of computers. And non-deterministic computers, and that is doing symbolic calculation. So here the base would be the bunch of neurons, how they compute. There's the connectionist and the large-scale neural. They say, no, the brain is one thing. You have to study it as one object, and it has a global state, and that's what's important. The brain together, the neurons together change their states, do stuff. There's a guy, Bickel, that says, yeah, but some genes are pretty important in cognition. And neurotransmitter also, so you have to go below neurons at the biochemical level to say cognition happened here. And of course, there's all the people that says, no, cognition is not in the head. It's in the interaction with the world, like our colleague in Antwerp. And of course, here, you would not use as a base the neural network. You will use the neuron body environment as the base. So already, after that, you understand why Wilson says nothing about the base. She says the physical. She doesn't even say the brain, because she does not want to deal with that. What would be the emergent? We are not all agreeing about what is consciousness. There are all kinds of properties that are associated to consciousness. And not everybody agree about that. And which one is a real property of consciousness, which one is a property of mental state in general, unconscious or conscious, blah, blah, blah. So you have to choose. If I read carefully Wilson, it seems that these two are important, so I will choose these two. So qualia, the transparency of perception. So when I have the experience of a qualia, I have the experience of an intrinsic properties. And I think the way she understands determinate and she probably has qualia in mind. But sometimes there's agency also, the theological goal-oriented. Of course, not just conscious thing can have goal-oriented behavior, but conscious is supposedly very important for consciousness. I found a lot of publications saying that probably not, but that's something else. We'll come back. Okay? So let's go. First case. If the base is neurotransmitters and genetic, so it's below neurons. So you have a biochemical state, and Wilson will say there's a conscious state, which is a subset of this one in power. In Sartana, you will have a biochemical state that becomes a conscious biochemical state. Both theories are completely useless to say anything interesting about this case. So, okay, if this is the right level, okay. These emergent theory do not help out. The mystery is the same. They just change the mystery of place. If it is a neurocomputational base, so it's part of the brain computer state, you have conscious computer state, you have computers that are not conscious, and after that, the computer is able to compute a conscious state. So you have to see R here in Wilson as some kind of analogous to the relation between a probabilistic Turing machine and its program. I really try to see if there's a gain here, thinking this relation in the way Wilson is saying, and I don't see any. Because in the way Wilson is saying, just think about an ordinary computer, which isn't not really the brain, but at least as an analogy. You look at the hardware states, and the software state is a more general property of the specific hardware. And it seems to me that the fact that you identify the relation that way does not help at all to understand what is the relation between software and hardware, which is the strong problem, the hard problem. So I don't know, maybe I lack imagination. Can Sartana and Gabe do better? So here you have computers that compute things, and here you have computers that compute conscious things. So things that they could not compute before. So you need some modal change. There's interesting tool in Bedeau theory of algorithmic emergence. He called it weak emergence, but not to mix with Wilson, I call it algorithmic emergence. The definition of Bedeau is here. If P is a macro property of some system S, then P is algorithmic emergent, if and only E. if and only if P is generatively explainable from all of S prior microfacts, but only in an incompressible way. So if your program is producing something new that cannot be explained except in just saying what happened just before, that's emergent in that sense. So that would give us the case of modal movement from here to here. And if it's incompressible in principle and not just in practice, that could be transformational emergent. However, you have to buy, this computer analogy and blah, blah, blah. So it gave me pause, let's say. But at least it seems that this way to understand emergence could be applied in GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. So that's what I blah, 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 blah. Okay. Connection is, the brain is one thing. We should study the network, completely the network of neurons as one object, complex objects. Here the relation would be a determinant, one would be a phase, an apparent change phase. Do we have independent reason to believe that physical phase change could be interesting to understand the brain? Yes. In the last 15 years, we got a lot of empirical data that seems to show that the brain is a system, a critical system. Critical system is a system that change phase. Water, gas, ferromagnetism, etc. Why do you believe that? Because of these properties that were measured. One, the brain is highly far from equilibrium. It's why most of the energy is going to the brain, to maintain it so far from equilibrium. Two, the brain activity is essentially arithmetic, regardless how we monitor. If we monitor at different scale, different way, it has some scale invariance, at least when it's not stimulated, so when it's spontaneously fire. That's the sign to be clear, close to the critical point. Under healthy condition, no brain temporal scale take primacy. So even if the brain is sometime in a cycle, if you change, there's no time scale that is privileged. And under certain behavior, when we calculate the interaction with the environment. So the brain is in fact very close to change phase most of the time. The most fundamental properties of the brain only are possible staying close to the critical instability independently of how such state is reached and maintained. So in fact, if there's such a transformation, I have to change my analogy. It's not a phase change. It's not passing from a stable to another stable state. It's passing from a stable to a metastable state. So a state is just close to the critical point. Okay. In order to operate, no. Okay. But to go beyond this hypothesis, we have to have an idea of what is happening in this complex object when it is conscious, to be able to talk about the relation in a more interesting way. Unfortunately, there's more than 20 theories in neurology of consciousness. But most of them do not have a good data, good empirical support. Only 4 families of theory have good empirical support. Good, I should not say that. Some empirical support, okay? And these 4 theories says when the brain is conscious, it must be because blah, blah, blah happening in the brain. The high order theories is that when the brain is conscious, is because the brain is representing its own representation. When I'm conscious, is because I am representing the fact that I'm saying the bag. So this definition is Kant, Locke. It's just, the neurologists often do not say, yeah, we took that in log, but some of them are honest enough to say, yeah, I took that in Canada. The global workplace theories, they say, there's all kind of stuff, that's Stanislas Dehaene. There's a lot of stuff happening in the brain at different place, but when a configuration of neurons fire a certain kind of states that is available to all parts of the brain, that is broadly broadcast, that's consciousness. So consciousness is when the brain is sharing information among all parts, especially in the zone of the global workplace, which is from here to here in the dump. The integrated information theories come from phenomenology, and we will discuss each of them according to the thing, just giving you a preview, is that everything that respects 6 axioms is conscious. Okay? The re-entry and predictive theory, sometimes they are considered separately, these two theories, sometimes they are considered together. The re-entry theory is that the minimum to be conscious is that once you enter the information, it comes back in the beginning and it starts again. So you just re-enter as an input the output you just produced. And the predictive process is the Bayesian people, because there's always Bayesian people somewhere in science, and they say, yeah, when the brain approximates Bayesian stuff, it's conscious. Okay, it's difficult to connect each of these as a real theory of consciousness, but together makes sense. How do you iteratively approximate a Bayesian? It's because there's a loop in the brain, and maybe predict is consciousness according to Bayesian. Okay. Let me just give the result, because now you're completely tired and unable to follow, and you just want to have a beer. Okay, let's try with the higher order theory. To be conscious is to meta-represent. I don't know how the two levels should work, the two-level representation inside this framework of Wilson. I just don't know. Maybe there's a way. I don't see that she would say, this is the determinate, this is determinable, and this is the more determinable, because that seems artificial. Yeah, I don't know how it could work in this framework. Okay. In this framework, higher order theory are pretty easy to accommodate, because you just have to have two transformations. There's a transformation for the brain to be able to produce something that looks like mental state, which is in fact goal-oriented stuff, and only a second one to get the qualia, and to get to something like qualia. And it's interesting because if you believe that consciousness is more sophisticated than not to be conscious, you would say that there's related here two events in the evolution, which would be nice to connect to evolution. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of data that to be conscious, you are better to make decisions and act than to be completely unconscious. So, as in a review of literature, Lowe and Rosenthal said, findings suggest that awareness, what would they call consciousness, might not have special utility. At least regarding an immediate impact on behavior, which would be the thing that you need to select. So sometimes it's one after the other, but it could be both at the same time. Could be you gain one transformation gain to you mental, and in connect almost at the same time consciousness, and you won't. Maybe there's no evolution. At least if the empirical data are still saying for most animals they don't need to be conscious to be efficient. Maybe us, we are the exception. I don't know. Okay, global workplace theory. So So the idea is that a conscious state would be a broadcast the brain is essentially modular, but when the brain broadcasts the same state everywhere, you would be conscious. So what is broadcast in the global workplace theory would be determinate, but each part of the brain would exemplify, would be a determinable, but each brain of the brain would exemplify a determinant. So I think the theory of Wilson, at least in this approach, could fit well. And is it really a determinable or determinant? There's thing to explore. There's thing to measure to J, if it looks like that. What is a little bit depressing is that the Wilson seems to fit well global workplace theories. I think it should go together. It could go together, but this is the one that has the less to say about the hard problem of all the theory of neural consciousness. Because they identify access consciousness to consciousness, which usually philosophers do not do. Okay. So for us, it would be moving from a metastable to a metastable state of a larger thing. So since these states change the correlation inside the brain, the correlation length, when you're close to the critical point or different distance, the correlation between different parts of the brain change. The length in which the brain is correlated or not, even if it's scale invariant. So that could be an interesting metaphor for them. Still metaphor, come on. We don't know anything about the brain yet, unfortunately. Okay, the phenomenologist. So the neurophenomenologist. What they say is that you buy these axioms, everything that exemplifies this axiom is conscious. Experience, first-person experience, exists intrinsically. Experience is structured. Experience is specific. There's no two experiences that are the same. Experience is unitary. It's structured, but it's one. And experience is definite. So experience is not determinable. If I see something in color and I show you the same scene is in black and white, it's not less experience. Okay, experience is always fully determined, full property, not graduate property. And the idea of this approach is to say we find things in the brain to verify each of these axioms, and therefore the brain is an object, cause effect, so it's an object producing cause and producing effects, structured in a way to produce at each time a maximum of irreducible integrated information. It's integrated because it's unitary and it's definite in time and in content, but it's also structured. It's real information, just 0, 0, 0, 0. It's real stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, what is meant here by experience and by existing?
Experience is first-person experience, the phenomenal one. They start from experience phenomenology, studying yourself.
Because the others are scientists, so do they have an operational notion of experience?
No. Okay. They don't have also, okay, I don't, not to my knowledge. They disagree among each other. And they also, here, this maximum irreducible thing, it's related to a quantity, okay? They call it phi, and it's by definition impossible to measure. But you can maybe measure this effect. One of the things, I'm just discussing philosophy, but one of the things is that when they say the brain exemplifies that, some part of the brain that are important for consciousness are different than the people here and the people here. So there could be ways to differentiate at least these three theories, even if it's difficult to prove one alone. At least to say, okay, we would expect activities there if this theory is true, okay, when you do X, Y, Z. Okay, where was it? And of course, in order to exemplify the axiom, they have to look in the brain, and it's what they call the substrate of consciousness, so the different part of the brain that would exemplify these axioms. Sometimes, and they are pretty generous. They would say maybe it's at the network level, maybe it's at the local neuronal group, maybe it's part. They are agnostic about which level of description we should go, except that we have to take account all the brain. Okay, weak emergence is really in trouble with this one because there's no way they would say that the qualia experience is determinable. They really insist on it. And in fact, in her book, she's not arguing against these people, but she's trying to arguing against phenomenologists that says exactly the same, okay? And if she does not have a good answer to that, weak emergence out for this conception of consciousness. Okay. One of the elegant thing about their approach is that this phi function that is supposed to be what the brain is producing maximum information integration is a function. It's a mathematical function according to them. Even if it's not directly measurable, maybe we can measure it indirectly. That's the goal. That's what they do now to prove that this theory is true. And it's a function. It could have an interesting nonlinear behavior or phase transition behavior. Sometimes it's not integrated enough to be conscious. You're sleeping or you're not really paying attention. And suddenly you pay attention, the function goes to a maximum because you're focused. And that, it could be mapping by a transformation. We could look to that. I think it fits pretty well their function to the people discussing the thermodynamics of the brain. There's some things that they could maybe discuss together, at least to design experiment. Of course, they would not agree about experience. What is experience? But okay, the re-entry one, I will discuss it only if you want. Okay. Okay, only if you really want to know. We'll go back during the question period. The body environment, that's cool because I think they are probably right. Maybe cognition is in the relation to the world. It's why the brain is maybe metastable. It's because the world is a certain structure and the brain evolved to be a certain structure adapted to the environment. But if it's in the relation, this is even more complicated than just study the brain because you have to study brain, body, world. And what is in this relation? That could be just a relation that does not imply consciousness and a relation that implies consciousness. So here I don't have a lot of things. Of course, the people discussing affordance have a lot of material to discuss how this relation is established because you see affordance in the world. That's what you see as a conscious being or unconscious being, able to act in the world, and you put aside the things that are not relevant for certain things. So there's a play between expectation and satisfaction. So there's a lot more to say in the final paper about how it could fit some emergent pattern. And now I'm delivering you. What did you learn? I don't know. Okay. Philosophy of mind is too complicated.
What kind of scientist was he?
Engineer, so I don't know if you can say.
Not
Not even a scientist.
But some scientists.
Okay, so
Are we live?
we have half an hour for question, debate. Are we, okay, sorry. Beer? No. Oh, but you are going, so.
Yeah, just a clarification question. So what of Wilson's what of the theories of emergence of what does it how can I explain? Okay, of Wilson's proposal, it fits one of the four theories of the emergence of consciousness. Is there one that fits more than others? Because sorry, I
Yes, Wilson, I think, but it's me. I think Wilson fit well global workplace, and it's not that bad for the reentry. The
And
one
then-
that I did not discuss.
And then yours?
Oh, me, it could fit everything because it's more vague. But if you want to go into details, I said what you should see. You should see a metastable, you should see blah, blah, blah. And maybe it's not there also. But what the point about this metaphysical proposition is that we go outside dualism and monism and we try something else to say if it can fit and work. And the idea of Wilson that it's not determinate like phenomenology. Your phenomenology is saying, the first person experience is determinate. Is a determinable rather to determinate. Even, I'm not sure it will solve the hard problem, but it's interesting to think like that when you go to see, how do we interpret experiments and how does it work? My position that you need a model transformation was, I have to say, too vague to be applicable at the beginning. When I began to think about this subject, I say, can you establish a model transformation empirically? That there's good chance, except saying in the past there was blah blah blah. But now that the literature about the fact that the metastable status of the brain is important, whatever the theory of the consciousness, because the brain is just an object that has certain strange properties, it becomes interesting maybe to use transformational emergence to try to understand why it is like that and how could it help to give idea to test the theories of the mind. But at the end, it's clear that the people develop, the people develop this to solve the hard problem. Okay, the motivation of these people, when you go to see why do they develop that, is to solve the hard problem. I'm quite sure that even if they manage to prove that it's true, it's a meta-representation, it's true that, or integrated, the hard problem will still be there. My impression is that it won't change most. Especially integrated, because integrated, they say everything that exhibits these axioms is conscious. So in fact, they don't solve the solved problem. They say, what kind of structure are conscious? But it would be interesting if we managed to have a robot with the 5 axioms. That would be interesting, because there they would say, if we have something like a brain in the robot that follow these 5 axioms, boom, it must be conscious. That would be interesting. I don't know if we would be able to know it's conscious, but at least it's a stimulating position. Interesting position. All these positions are interesting, I think. They are quite interesting. And often, all of them are developed empirically the last 15 years because we have more way to probe the brain. So these are all interesting. But they are not embodied cognition at all. At all. So if you are an embodied cognition and you say, no, it's not just the brain, there's something in the relations, you will not find them satisfying.
Okay. Thanks.
already spoken of it.
Sure. Thank you so much. Two questions. One general.
What about probability?
Almost. Now, the first one is kind of for a native point of view. I was asking myself about the difference between consciousness and cognition. Because in all your talk, you talk about consciousness,
Yeah.
and only when you have to specify the basis B, you talk about cognition.
Yeah.
In another slide, it seems
Yeah.
to me that cognition is one of the subset. I don't know how I'm gonna say.
Yes.
Property of consciousness. So this is the first one, and the second.
Can I answer it before
Yes,
forgetting the? Okay. You're absolutely right. In the literature, it's not always clear, and I had to speak too fast. Okay. So these are theories of consciousness, okay, not cognition. They pretend that consciousness is associated to these processes, okay? But how to identify the level here? Since we don't have a definition of consciousness that would that would apply to the relations, because we come from phenomenology for consciousness. It's like the first person experience. To decide the level of that could be interesting, we talk about the level of cognition. So I look at the literature on cognition to identify potential candidate for consciousness. Okay, but it's because of a lack in the literature on consciousness. So I had to turn to the cognition because the literature on consciousness most of what I read does not even talk about the possibility that consciousness is in the relation to the other world, the external world, and not just in the brain. Sometimes they will include the body. Phenomenology will include the body. Phenomenology, yes, but not the scientific literature on consciousness.
Okay.
I think these guys, they are saying the brain is complicated enough. Okay, the cognition, it seems that you need the external world, okay, because there's some cognitive process that makes no sense if it's just in the brain. But for consciousness, usually it seems that the neuroscientists, even in a review of literature in Nature, they don't even talk about embodied cognition at all. They say, yeah, that's not our subject. That's something else. So, but I think it's problematic because if you think cognition is outside the head, why not consciousness too? How could you exclude it a priori? So at least you have to explore the possibility. But you see, the four main families of theories of neural consciousness, there's nothing outside the brain. Nothing at all. They don't even think it could be outside the brain. In the dominant one. The four among the 21, 22. Okay, your second question.
My second question is not about probability, but about possibility.
I knew.
No, because it's really interesting actually when you relate the Wilson proposal and your proposal in the slide in which you said the conscious mental state is a genuinely new model profile.
Mm-hmm. That's my definition. For me, if there's no model change, there's no emergence at all.
Okay, so and after that you say emerger required that the mental state was modally impossible.
The new state,
state.
to get to the new state, you cannot just follow the ordinary dynamics you had before. There must be something new.
Yeah, so the question is the model profile. In other part, you talk about access to other possibilities. Yeah. So, what kind of possibilities? Yeah. But not necessarily epistemic objectives. It's also, I don't know, now I'm reading some paper on the difference between pre-possibility and new possibility. So pre-possibility is We have music notes. Is the symphony already there?
Yeah.
If yes, you have a possibility. If not, you have something more. And the other is about impossible. So impossibility is very hard to define or to argue for. So it's really you want to talk about impossibility or I don't know, something more soft,
Okay.
improbability, very, very.
No. I want to say impossible.
Okay, thanks.
When something, novelty is not emergent, special novelty is emergence. Okay, I think emergence, if you don't put something strong like modal barrier that is strong enough, any change could be emergent. So I want some emergent is special, it's rare. Okay, so the idea is that, and of course, it's another thing between Guay, Sartoner, and the metaphysician. The metaphysician, they like to talk about objects because that's what they like, state, objects, level. I don't care about objects. I care about dynamics, what they can do, okay? So I never say, our definition of emergence is that whatever it is before could do blah, 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 and now it could do something else, okay? So it was circulating in a certain phase space, whatever, deterministic, not deterministic, and if you stay there will never be emergence, ever. Of course, you can say, oh, the probability to get here is very low, knowing blah, blah, blah. Okay, could be very, very low. Is it the same space? Same laws? Same? Yes, no emergence. You have to change phase space. Okay. You have to have genuine new possibility. Of course, after that you say, yeah, but Alex, the objection I have always is that, but in fact, I could just draw a big space over, and you just pass from this region to this region. I say, yes, but you're big, you need to have good reason to put it. Of course, philosopher would say, I put it because it's possible. Okay, I agree. But do you have good reason that there's laws or something that looks like laws that allow you to define this big space, not just like metaphysically possible? Okay, if you say things like logically possible, metaphysically possible, for me it's just words. What I want to say is that what kind of constraint you have. Here, I knew the constraint. It's quantum electrodynamics of a certain type. Here, inside the fractional quantum effect, I know what is the space. It's a certain kind of dynamics. And it's not possible to pass from here to here. That's it. But of course, philosophers, since they do not think concretely ever, they like things like metaphysically possible. It's always possible to bypass my definition by having a big circle. Yes. But I think it's useful to think like that. For example, you could imagine a species evolving in a fitness landscape, okay? Let's imagine the environment is stable enough, it's not changing all the time. And the species evolved in a certain landscape. So for certain pattern, certain phenotype, you have a certain fitness. And it can move in this landscape evolving. And suddenly, it gains an adaptation where the landscape changed completely because it has access, for example, hunting during the night, and it could not before. It makes no sense to use the same fitness space. The fitness change. Of course, you can say, yeah, but in a bigger fitness space, because you don't have constraint on your fitness space. It's always possible to build the fitness space of everything. But at least from you as a biologist, you say, no, the constraint of the species are blah, blah, blah. And suddenly, because of many adaptation, this last adaptation switch. I'm not sure there's a lot of case like that, but case like flying, there's a big difference between just limping, gliding, and actually flying. When you gain actual flying, it changes everything. the predator cannot find you in the same way. If you're a being like a lizard and you are cold blood, and you progressively at one point manage to maintain your temperature for long enough to be active during the night, it changed everything. So that would be a change of phase space. But you're right. If you're a Platonician, when I discussed with Charles at the beginning, it was, of course, there's all possibility exists metaphysically in a big, gigantic place. And I say, yeah, but I don't care about that. I talk about constraint in models, in the way we try to understand the constraint of what is existing in the real world, not in the metaphysical blah, blah, blah that I don't understand. Does it shed some light?
Then the possibility here, the possibility that you are talking about, the changing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you would think that there's system with brains that can do all kind of stuff. And at one point, there's system with brains that can be conscious. It was not possible before.
Now, why you are saying that it was not possible before? Was impossible because this is.
Because they didn't have the configuration of the brain that could exemplify that at all. So of course, it's not physical laws in that case. It's a constraint of the kind of being they are at that point.
But would there be brains at all if they are not capable of exhibiting consciousness?
Do they, what?
Would they be brain at all?
I don't know. That's a good question because I presume that there could be brain not conscious that are able to goal-oriented behavior but do not have qualia. I presume it's possible. I don't know. If a neurologist said to me, everything that has a brain is necessarily conscious, okay, yeah, I buy it. It's the brain that is important. Here, I presume that there could be simple being with maybe not a lot of neurons. I don't know if fly are conscious, for example. But they have goal-directed behavior, clearly. But I don't know if they are conscious. I don't know if they have qualia. That I don't know. I presume that it could be possible they don't have. I don't believe in the zombie for us, but, maybe fly are zombies.
So why is it? Sorry. No, I finished. So in this following this, why still hold on to consciousness and not wonder about sentience rather than consciousness?
Sorry?
Why not go to sentience instead of consciousness?
Oh, I'm talking because the literature is discussing unconsciousness. I could do the same. It goes to the neurological literature about other stuff. Yeah.
Because I know the stuff about Quentin the guy from ULB,
On the cognition of plants?
Yeah, but he's not talking about cognition, he's talking about consciousness.
Yeah, well, I don't know what he's talking about.
So now
Yeah, okay. I don't know. For me, consciousness is much stricter than cognition or goal behavior. It's what phenomenology says. Because for me, the thing that impressed me is qualia. Okay, the thing that is really important, because most of the time I have difficulty to understand even what my colleague phenomenology are talking about, because I don't have the vocabulary and I don't have the tradition. But the idea that when I look at this object, I have really the experience of something intrinsic. I don't have at any point the experience that I'm establishing a relation with this. I really have the impression, it's the transparency of perception, that I have in front of me an intrinsically black object. I think it's so strong that that's interesting. Maybe we're wrong about that. Maybe we're wrong to have, maybe we don't interpret this experience, but the transparency of qualia, I think it's an interesting observation of phenomenology that has deep consequence for me that is not phenomenologist, because I don't know how to explain that at all.
Sociology.
Could be it's the way we talk or the way we, maybe.
Just a question of clarification. So you said here, for example, it's not a question of what is possible in the law, or that.
Yeah. So do you have a law is just a rule to explain how you move in the phase space, And the law defines the size of the phase space, what is possible, what's possible. So if you change phase space, you have to change laws.
And here you said, like, once you have consciousness, you turn to a new law. Or you said it's not a question.
Something model. I don't know if laws is what good to explain behavior at the biological level. I'm not sure it's the right concept, but the thing that make the dynamics, that produce the dynamics, is working in another space. That's what I say. In physics, we would call that law, but law is maybe not the good concept to explain kind of dynamics in biology. But it's a different phase space. If it's emergent in that sense, okay, of course, maybe it's not emergent in that sense, and it's not emergent.
Then if you don't have it, like, how can you say it's impossible? Like, it's impossible regarding what?
But usually you have enough grasp on the dynamics, even if you don't have formal laws, to say that something is not possible. Of course, if you have laws that are well-defined mathematically, it's much easier to make the argument, because you say, I can show you these laws cannot get you there. But most science do not have strong laws like that. You use models and you say, okay, what is possible or not according to the behavior of this thing, what they can do. Like they don't fly, so they can have access to certain stuff, but once they fly, everything changes.
But if it's regarding a behavior, it's not like what is possible or not, it's just what is, and then it's like
No, it's not just okay. It's because you think about model logic and your mind now. Okay. When you think about dynamics, it's because you have a too much version in logic. You say a possible world is everything you can do, so it's actual, so it's not model. Okay, nobody been work like that in the world. Okay, in science, we don't think about possible world. We'd say, okay, I have a system. Is it in this state? And it has access to all these states depending of the circumstances. These are possible states it could get. Okay, of course, if I have something like a possible world, I have to include a lot of stuff in it, and also maybe all the things that this thing can do as a possible. It's not the way you understand possibility in phase space. In phase space, it's contextual. In this blah blah blah, I can have access to this. I'm moving in this. If I was in another circumstance, I will be moving in that. It's much more local than possible. It's more the logic of situation, who was developed by the Californian guy, Stanford, the guy that wrote the world on the book Pro-Procrastination. Who was this guy? It's a magnificent philosophy book I have in my office explaining how procrastination is the best thing in the world as a philosopher. So he spent the time to write the book, except the paper, rather than write the paper he was supposed to write. It's a philosopher and he has a logic of situation, which are very contextual stuff. Quentin Ruin also in his book have a notion of possibility that is much more situated possibility. It's much more smaller than possible world. So it's more what I have in mind here when I talk about possibility. Of course, it's not the semantic of possible world. This is too big. This is not contextual enough for me.
And
so it's model dependent.
The first is a lot of different contexts that can.
Yeah, the first is like the phase space will be defined by laws or a certain model, and you go to another model that cannot be in a linear way transformed in the first one. So there's a break, and you have another phase space.
And how can you not say it's just another context? Then maybe
Depends of you can define it by context, it depends of the model. If the model says it's impossible to get from there to there, but it's under the same theory, do something about it. Because you always can say, most of change of context would be something from outside arrived and changed the situation. Okay, that's why we have this bizarre realm. In particular, the realm R to which S1 and S2 both belong, for example, the physical realm, is closed such that nothing outside of R participate in S1 realm. Because the easiest way to get a change of phase space is to say, I go to change it by hand. Something from outside, completely different. The artisan is going in the world and impose a new situation. This clause excludes that. Because, for example, typically in the fractional quantum Hall effect, need low temperature, material that is easy to measure to have the Hall effects as plain as possible, very low temperature, very high magnetic field. You could say, aha, the magnetic field is changing the thing. Therefore, it's not emergence according to you, because there's something outside, like the artisan imposing a form to the thing. So but in that fact, the magnetic field is part of the general theory of electromagnetism. So it's not an external cause, it's just a constraint. Because that's the difficulty with novelty. Okay, physics is allergic to novelty. Physics is a science of, I have this law, everything according to this law could exist, blah, blah, blah. It's very open to novelty. It's why we use physics to prove, to argue for this theory, because it's the less welcoming milieu for emergence you can imagine. It's physics. In biology, you go to argue about emergence to biologists, they would say, yeah, of course, there's a lot of new stuff all the time and completely new. So they are not hostile to emergence. So we wanted to argue a theory of emergence to the more hostile people about emergence and say, if we convince them, our theory of emergence could be interesting for their stuff, because we convince the more reductionist people you can find. Physicists even believe that everything is physics. It's so crazy. Okay, like sociology is physics, psychology is physics. Yeah, like what the fuck? You're completely insane. But you have to argue against that, not just say they are insane. So here, that's troubled them, because that's a phenomenon they know. They are very proud of it. You know, it won a Nobel Prize. And you say, this is clearly a change of phase space. Oh, fuck. There could be other new stuff in the world. That's an absolutely unpredictable phenomenon. They could not predict it because of the spin statistic theory. That's why it was a big deal when it happened, when it was discovered. Do we have time? Yes, 5 minutes.
So just to clarify the question at the start of your talk, you were talking about how it's impossible to affect the mind without affecting the body. It was an issue of some sort, but why wouldn't it be an issue in the reverse, that you're not, because that's precisely what you're trying to do. You're trying to see how affecting the mind affects the body. And so how is it an issue?
This was an issue because when we had, before you were all here, we had a 5-year project on free will here with neurologists. And that was, we speak for 5 years of, is downward causation, could you see downward causation? Could you see effect of the mind on the body? But of course you can see effect of the body on the mind, you take drugs, you smoke, etc. And even if we try with neurologists, we never find a confirmation that it was not ambiguous, that we could say, okay, go measure that in the lab, do some experiment, some tests with people, and it's a clue that you can have change the mind, change the body. The reverse, change the body, drugs, change the mind, okay. So that was quite depressing because, of course, a big part of the theory that they were testing of free will necessitate the mind to be able to modify the body. So what we see in lab always is a co-change. So you see, you see that it's possible that the mind is a cause on the body, but there's also a cause doing, and you don't know which one is doing which. So empirically, we didn't find any way. So it's the problem that Kim called the overdetermination of causality of the mind on the body. And which is strange because in the other direction, no problem. If you take drugs, you obviously have change in your mind.
Yeah, but I have a hard time understanding how it's a problem in the other direction you have the problem.
If you believe the mental state is over of course it's this difficulty comes also from the fact that you believe that there's physical state, mental state, co-temporal.
Sure.
Yeah, of course, if you don't believe that, it's another. But if you believe that, it's very difficult to see how to do an experiment where this is going influence the body.
But aren't all these studies on like attention and this kind of stuff that's doing that, no? Because you have people sitting in front of screens and they say, okay, now look at this, and then they look at some stuff happening in the brain.
So what they say that they see is the mind seems to enter the brain through a loop. Okay, so there's a time delay.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to say, or it's not, the body, mind is not like that, it's like that. And here after that, it's difficult to say which state influence what at what time.
For drugs, it's the same, you guys time delay as well.
Okay, if it does not, I would put more my money that it works in that sense, but it's the other sense that was the more interesting for free will, for example, and it's not easy to identify. So when you have things like attention, see, okay, attention, but the guy will always say, yeah, but is it the mind or is it a stimulus that you have, blah, 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 reflex that just happened to be just before the moment or you are conscious, blah, blah. And when you measure time in the brain, super difficult. Statistically, it's garbage, there's too much, and you do statistical analysis on many people, very difficult to identify which was the real causal crux.
It seems to me it's just a question of principle, possible in the sense that you start from the principle that it's the body that is affecting the mind, and then when you see effect of the mind on the body, you say, oh, but no, it was the body that affects the mind.
But what you want when you test a causal link is to be able to any measure, do something here and look what happened here. If I manage to keep the rest under control. Not necessarily fixed, but under control. And that's what is difficult with the mind-body problem. Max has a good paper on that because it's not and Woodward has a paper because he says, I want my theory to be tested and to show if there's mind over body. And it's quite difficult if both of them are the same thing. It's not okay, it's a reductionist problem. But if you really believe that they are not the same thing, but they are codependent, and they move like that, very difficult to establish that I can change this, have the rest under control to see the effect here, knowing that changing this, because of the dependence, there will be something changing here, at least a little bit later. So what is which? What influence what? Because this relation is not causal. By the way, this relation between the mind
I think you're thinking
and
like
the
a
body is
monist.
non-causal.
Yeah.
And so for a view, it doesn't make sense. It's another problem.
Yeah.
But I think it's because we are not thinking like a dualist. If that's only a problem if you think like a dualist.
No, it's a problem also for these guys that are emergentist,
Sure, sure.
co-temporal.
If I have a more interesting question, just a short question. Why would, because you are talking about pluralism in emergency, and for emergence, it was an issue and not satisfying. But do you remember the book by Karen Bennett about groundings? Why couldn't we do the same solution? Is that it's a family of similar relation, which has a formal structures and
Yeah, but what, Yeah. the problem is that if the family is defined by dependent novelty,
No, but maybe there is a more interesting
yeah,
relationship
okay,
to find.
but I would be curious if someone says, okay, guys, you Wilson and you are under that umbrella. I would say okay, but I don't see the family is for now, and especially I don't see them saying I'm in their family. Wilson is quite explicit. She spent a lot of page in a recent book saying that Gay, Sartana, and phrase are completely beside the point.
No, that's the problem of metaphysics.
Because she says, because for her, the concept of emergence is incompatible with causality, clearly. Beer time?
Thank you.